power's off right now, and I can't exactly explain why, but it doesn't really matter. So I'm gonna do. We're gonna revisit a bit of this, which is the psychology of human relations. I'm gonna put this in the history of propaganda because this is essential. Psychology is essential to propaganda, to art, and to life, and especially leadership. All things considered. Now, I may be sitting here with my dog here, Zoe. Hey, you're on the video this time, and I flipped this open, and it chapter 7 where it goes into nonverbal communication. There we go. It's chapter 7. So and then there's I'll go back to the index, why this particular text at the college level is so important. And again, I took this course along with human sexuality and gender and sexuality at Fanshawe College, along with an art history credit at that's a university credit, thanks to UWO. and let me see what else. There was some other stuff. Is Islam, and I had like 4 or 5 courses, something along those lines. Anyways, I put my cert for arts and humanities. It's up on LinkedIn because I feel it necessary to put the proof into the pudding, so to speak, because I don't feel respected and I don't feel like people really give me credit for when and where it's due. And knowing the psychology of people, and that a lot of individuals out there don't like smart people, and they don't like people who stand up for themselves, and they don't like being confronted with the mirror, right? With the Medusa scenario, because that's the only way to kill Medusa is to shine the mirror in her face, or in the culture's face, so that it sees how much of a monster it is. Now, again, when I think about this, I go through the chapters, and this is the dirty dozen, right? This is the human factors, and it also applies to, like I was just saying, the principles of leadership. Because I think about it, and you're getting into, let's see, there's a picture in here, appearance, right? And it's a photograph of 3 RCMP officers. How you doing, guys? So, and the cultural importance of dress and ceremonial, and hence how that relies, or say that goes, that cross references back to body dressing, and of course the other queer identities and all that mumbo jumbo, as far as I'm concerned, happens to be, right? Creativity is a threat display, and so on and so forth. So I might just put this in start a new chapter here with the fourth volume, because I'd like to keep the volumes smaller and under 50 videos, unless I keep adding reference videos to other people's work, other academics or intellectuals or figures of culture, in order to build up this project again, which is the history of propaganda, in coordination with the other 2 facets, which are the art talks and bits and bytes, right? Each one, again, I call it the Holy Trinity in the last video, because that's what it is. In order to put a good recipe together, you have to have good ingredients. And so then this effort to deconstruct the propaganda of our time, within the past 20 years with the internet and the advent of instantaneous communications vis-a-vis Twitter or similar proto social networks or chat rooms that then developed the whole amalgamation of message boards, chat boards, IRC into social media compiled, right? MySpace into one source, along with influences of Tumblr, of Stumble Upon, even if you remember Stumble Upon, I loved Stumble Upon. It was a great thing. I just couldn't remember my freaking password. But anyways, if I'm going to highlight anything in here, because it goes about this as a lesson plan, to read it as a standalone, and I'll go back to the index here at the beginning. Again, this is compiled by Professor W.P. Haig, and it's taken from Interpersonal Communications Relating to Others, 4th Canadian edition, and Sociology, a Down-to-Earth Approach, 4th Canadian edition. So, good information never gets old, right? The cultural touchstones might change, but the information never gets old. This is why we're still reading Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato, right? This is why we're still reading Shakespeare, and we're still reading. Oh, geez, I haven't read Paradise Lost in a bit here, so forgive me for getting. Imagine having so much information in your head. Cause you to get dizzy. It really can. Anyways. So, and in the previous chapter of 7, let's go back here, is listening and responding. So nonverbal communication skills and listening and responding. Okay, so listening and responding, listening defined, listening styles, listening barriers, improving your listening comprehension and responding skills, improving critical listening and responding skills, responding to confirm or disconfirm others, improving empathic listening and responding skills, improving your responding skills. I'm not going to get too much into this because, it would probably be good for me to read this. And since the power is out, I got nothing else better to do right now. Who gives a shit? But, these are all stuff. This is all things that I learned very young. I've had, again, having the advantage of being around recovering drug addicts, and my father being a salesman, insurance salesman, that these skills were absolutely essential for his survival. And communication and interpersonal skills, again, human relations, are essential to survival, because no man is an island, and you will not survive very long in isolation. So the nonverbal communication skills. What I learned about nonverbal communication, the challenges of interpreting nonverbal messages, nonverbal communication codes, interpreting nonverbal communication, improving your ability to interpret nonverbal messages. So let's skip a bit here. So again, this is stuff that I really concentrate on. So I skipped here, this page, body movements, postures, and gesture. These are all stuff that you learn and becomes a part of you with the military, honestly, or with dance, or with martial arts. You see, these are all skills that have been done away with, so to speak, because of the technology. And again, I'm referencing previous videos where I talk about, well, the digital frontier and our relationship with technology and how that gets in the way. And this is actually citing before this is nothing new, right? How cell phones are listening blockers, right? So they're distractions to actual relationships, and the instantaneous nature, which then induces the dopamine feedback loops and overloading and burnout. Um, you don't have the reward anymore through the biochemical system uh, to give you positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement to any kind of relation, right? The immediacy has been replaced by a proxy in a lot of cases. And, hence why we have to go through this, hence why I feel the responsibility and the empowerment to continue on with this project however I can. And yeah, okay, let's just move on here because, it's, I'm going to read this here. Is it the next page? Okay. I'm going to read Adapting to Intimacy. Interaction adaptation theory, discussed on page 182, suggests that we adapt to the behaviors of people around us. Research in one study wanted to find out how different levels of intimacy affect, so that affect, right, not effect, how one partner will adapt or respond to the other. There were 4 different levels of intimacy in the study: very low intimacy, low intimacy, very high intimacy, and very high intimacy. There was also a control group in which there was no expression of intimacy between the 2 partners. First, the experiments had 2 people interact in a small apartment. After the couple's short conversation, the researchers asked one person to come into another room to fill out a questionnaire, while the other person, the target of the study, stayed in the first room to complete a questionnaire. The person who left the room was then instructed to be either intimate or highly intimate, or to exhibit a low or very low level of intimacy with the other person when they had a second conversation. In the high or very high intimacy group, the second member of the couple was told to increase his or her nonverbal intimacy towards the partner by moving somewhat closer to the partner, smiling more, using more eye contact, and perhaps touching the partner. The subjects were also told to be warmer and more flirtatious with their partner. Those in the very high intimacy condition were given the same instruction, but were told to be dramatically intimate. People who had the low intimacy conversation were told to act colder or more distant, disinterested towards their partner. In the very low intimacy condition, the subjects were told to move far away from their partners, smile much less, use much less eye contact, and act extremely bored. What the researchers were really looking at was how the target person adapted to the person who came back into the room. Targets in the 2 intimacy treatments, intimate and highly intimate, responded by also being more intimate, smiling, moving closer to their partners, and being more pleasant and engaging. Targets in the 2 low intimacy conditions also mirrored what their partners were doing and became less non-verbally pleasant, defined in part by having less eye contact and not smiling, as well as becoming more verbally hostile. The researchers reported that the targets also used verbal repair strategies, meaning that they asked what was wrong and attempted to understand why the other person was acting less intimate. In the summary, people adapted by mirroring the behavior of the other person. In a low intimacy condition, the target used conversation to try to understand what was happening. So to apply this research to your life, This study suggests that people are likely to adapt their nonverbal behavior to mirror what their partner does. If a friend or another person you know increases nonverbal intimacy, there is a likelihood that you will be also increase your nonverbal intimacy. If an acquaintance is not intimate or is standoffish, you're also likely to be less open and responsive to that person. When person when people disconfirm you in obvious ways, such as by saying negative things about you or not looking at you, you're likely not only to reciprocate but also to compensate for such discomforting behavior. So mirroring, that's what that one's about. And this is why it's so hard to deal with corporations, right? Because corporations are not people, and they don't have intimacy, right? Large multinational corporations, national corporations, even governments don't have a personality, right? They're an organization of people. They're an amalgamation. They're a dominant hierarchy of people. So you see how this can go wrong, in that the faults of the leader trickle down into the policies and the attitudes of the government, if not the corporations, the companies, the platoons, and the squads. This is why I got angry, when I did this interview recently, because I've had a lot of opportunities. Well, not I didn't have the interview. I was selected a second time by a headhunter to become a technical instructor at Borden for aircraft structures, which I'm quite experienced, and but people don't always have the time and don't always have the attention to detail and don't always have the competence to look through someone's resume or to ask the correct questions. And what I mean by correct is that, especially with military people, or with people, or with engineers especially, which have, or anyone that has access to sensitive information or secret or classified information for the matter, if you don't ask the right question, you won't get the right answer. And a lot of it is contextual or circumstantial. So if you weren't there, you weren't there. And okay, so the reason why I get annoyed is because people don't value youth leadership programs, and people who are not familiar with the cadet programs here in Canada or in Britain or in Australia, even New Zealand or the United States, where you have these induction programs. So ROTP here, Reserve Officer Training Program, and again, cadets. Or in the States, you have ROTC or JROTC, and all of these things are taught through the motions. You don't necessarily understand when you're doing it as a young person or as a parent necessarily. So this is talking about boundaries. 4 zones of space, territory, touch. And again, I talked about, we're all territorial, right? Appearances, immediacy. Arousal and dominance. So that's going to be an important one here, because you're considering the dimensions for interpreting nonverbal behavior. This is how basically you can decipher and detect a psychopath in front of you. These are the tools in which you have to learn and uh, and utilize, right, and practice. Because you can't be a good leader, and you can't be a good teacher, you can't be a good mechanic unless you have good interpersonal skills. You can't be a good salesman, you can't be a good doctor. You really can't do much of anything. Especially for nerds. Nerds have a I would say introverted people have a very low tolerance for bullshit, and all of this hyperfixation in the culture upon mental conditions and identity, right? Because it's of cultural Marxism, so divide into infinity so that no one has any kind of friend group, and you're microcellularized, right? You're this person in that cell, little boxes, get in the pod, eat the bugs. If we're gonna use an internet meme. A fractured society. Becoming other oriented. Because you got to give love to get love. And I really gave up on humanity for a while. I really did. I just wanted to drive myself off a cliff. Honestly, something like that. Fade away, just numb myself, lidocaine in that downward spiral that is depression, because it didn't seem like anything was controllable or anything was within my reach, and that society hated me for what I am and who I am and what I represent. Focus on ethics, right? Because there's ethics and there's morals. There's a big difference between the two. Ethics are objective and morals are subjective. So someone's morality or virtues, by their own interpretation, especially if we're talking about a fractured society, means a constant state of conflict and a heightened response, right? So the fight, flight, or freeze responses, which is adrenal stimulation, right? And then burnout, which is then PTSD and depression, and so on and so forth. Again, not to dilute the message here, but this is all stuff that we do without knowing it, or that people of older generations were cognizant of and conscious of, because we didn't have this large node-to-node, peer-to-peer network here. Verbal communication skills. Now, these are good. This is a good textbook because it uses, of course, most textbooks do, right? They use pictures and pictorials or references to the culture at the time to make it relatable. So here's Zits. I really liked Zits, the comic strip. about dealing with a teenager, right? And then there's the Far Side in here, and other comic strips, showing a bit of the showing a bit of the professor's personality. Because that's what you have to do. You have to make it relatable. So I hope you find the history of propaganda relatable, because this is my life, and I'm living it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. We'll come back to this naturally, but I'm glad you're here.